When Clara Bennett walked into the room, expecting a discussion about her family's debt, she realized too late that the deal had already been made, and the price was her. The restaurant looked like any other luxury establishment in downtown Chicago. Warm lights glowed behind tall glass windows, expensive wine bottles lined polished shelves, and quiet music drifted through the air as wealthy guests enjoyed private dinners. To the outside world, the place represented success and exclusivity. But inside the private dining room at the back of the building, the atmosphere felt very different. The air was tense. Clara Bennett paused at the doorway before stepping inside, trying to steady the nervous energy building in her chest. For weeks she had been fighting to solve the crisis threatening her family, and tonight's meeting was supposed to be her final attempt to negotiate. Her brother had promised the men waiting inside would listen. But the moment Clara entered the room, she sensed something was wrong. 3 men sat around a large wooden table. 2 of them were strangers in dark suits who watched her carefully as she approached. The third man was someone she recognized immediately, Daniel Bennett. Clara's older brother looked nothing like the confident businessman he had once been. His shoulders were tense, and the expression on his face carried a quiet desperation that made Clara's stomach tighten with dread. For months, Daniel had insisted he could fix the problems surrounding the family's finances. He had promised their late father's company could recover from the disaster that nearly destroyed it. But those promises had slowly collapsed under the weight of reality. The Bennett family business had once been a small but respected logistics company operating in Chicago's shipping industry. For years, it provided steady income and stable work for dozens of employees. Then Daniel made a decision that changed everything. Believing he could expand the company's profits, he accepted a large investment from a group of lenders connected to international shipping contracts. At first, the money seemed like a lifeline. New equipment was purchased. Additional cargo routes were secured. Daniel spoke confidently about expanding the company beyond the city and into global markets. But the investment came with conditions Daniel did not fully understand. The lenders were not ordinary investors. They were connected to a financial network controlled by powerful criminal organizations. When one of the company's shipments was intercepted during an international investigation, millions of dollars disappeared overnight. The lenders demanded immediate repayment for their losses. Daniel could not pay. The Bennett family's business collapsed within weeks. Their accounts were frozen, their contracts terminated, and their remaining assets seized by the same network that once promised them prosperity. Now, Daniel owed more money than he could ever repay, and the men sitting in that private dining room represented the final authority on how that debt would be resolved. Clara slowly took a seat across from her brother. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the men at the table reached for a folder resting beside his glass. He slid the folder toward her. The documents inside showed the full extent of Daniel's debt. Numbers filled the pages. Figures so large Clara had trouble believing they were real. Interest had accumulated rapidly since the failed shipment. Additional penalties had been added for violating the financial agreements Daniel signed months earlier. The total amount was far beyond anything their family could repay. Clara felt the weight of the situation settle into her chest. Still, she forced herself to remain calm. She had prepared for this meeting carefully. Her plan was simple: negotiate time. If the lenders allowed them several months, she might find a way to rebuild part of the company and begin repaying the debt gradually. It was the only chance they had left. Clara began explaining the proposal she had prepared. Her voice remained steady as she described the potential recovery plan, outlining how she could restructure the company and restore limited operations. But the men across the table listened with expressions that revealed little interest. When Clara finished speaking, one of them leaned back slightly in his chair. The faintest hint of amusement appeared on his face. Then he calmly explained something Clara had not realized when she walked into the room. This meeting was not a negotiation. The debt had already been resolved. The door behind Clara opened quietly. A fourth man entered the room. Clara did not recognize him immediately, but the reaction from the others at the table made his importance clear. Both lenders stood up the moment he appeared. Even Daniel lowered his eyes toward the floor. The man moved through the room with quiet confidence, his presence instantly shifting the atmosphere from tense to controlled. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit and carried himself with a calm authority, of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His name was Luca Moretti. Across several American cities, the Moretti name had become synonymous with power inside the underground financial world. Luca controlled networks capable of moving millions of dollars through hidden channels across international borders. Shipping routes, investment operations, private security companies. Every piece of that empire worked together with precise efficiency. And now Luca Moretti stood at the head of the table studying Clara Bennett. His dark eyes examined her carefully, as though measuring something beyond her appearance. Clara felt the intensity of his gaze immediately. There was nothing aggressive about it, but there was something far more unsettling. Calculation. Luca took the empty chair at the end of the table. One of the lenders spoke quietly, summarizing the situation for him. Daniel Bennett's debt had been transferred to Luca's financial network earlier that week. From that moment forward, Luca controlled the outcome. Clara listened as the explanation continued. The Bennett family could not repay the money. Their business was already gone, and Daniel Bennett had nothing left to offer, except one thing: Clara Bennett. Daniel's voice trembled slightly when he finally spoke. He explained that Luca had offered a solution that would erase the entire debt. In exchange, Clara would come under Luca's protection and authority. The words sounded carefully chosen, but their meaning was unmistakable. Clara realized the truth slowly. Her brother had offered her as payment. The room fell silent as the reality settled over her. Clara looked at Daniel, hoping to see some sign that he regretted the decision. Instead, she saw only desperation. He believed this was the only way to save her, and the only way to save himself. Luca Moretti finally spoke. His tone remained calm, almost indifferent. To him, the arrangement was simply business. The Bennett family's debt would be cleared. Clara Bennett would belong to him. No threats were made. No violence was necessary. The decision had already been accepted by everyone in the room. Everyone except Clara. For a long moment she remained silent. Then she spoke. The words she revealed next carried a quiet certainty that changed the entire atmosphere inside the room. Clara Bennett told Luca Moretti something about her past. Something connected to a secret she had hidden for years. And for the first time since entering the room, Luca Moretti froze. Men like Luca Moretti never hesitated. In the criminal world that stretched quietly beneath the glittering skyline of Chicago, hesitation was a weakness few leaders could afford. Decisions had to be sharp, immediate, and final. The men who ruled that world survived not because they were merciful, but because they were decisive. And for more than a decade, Luca Moretti had been known as the most decisive man in that world, which was exactly why the silence that followed Clara Bennett's revelation unsettled everyone inside the negotiation hall. Moments earlier, the room had been tense with anger and suspicion. Rival factions watched each other carefully across the long conference table. Every movement weighed with the possibility of violence. But after Clara spoke, the tension changed. It did not disappear. It deepened, because for the first time anyone could remember, Luca Moretti had paused. The name carried weight far beyond Chicago, across multiple criminal networks operating in North America and Europe. Luca Moretti's reputation had grown into something almost mythological. Stories about his rise to power circulated constantly through the underworld. Stories about calculated betrayals, strategic takeovers, and quiet operations that dismantled rival organizations without warning. Unlike many Mafia leaders who inherited power through family bloodlines, Luca had built his empire from almost nothing. 10 years earlier, the Moretti organization had been a relatively small operation involved mostly in smuggling and protection rackets tied to the city's port districts. They had influence, but not dominance. That changed the moment Luca took control. Where older bosses relied on tradition, Luca relied on strategy. He reorganized the structure of the organization completely. Instead of focusing on street-level crime, he expanded into areas that generated far greater influence. International shipping contracts, private security firms, financial consulting companies that quietly moved enormous amounts of money across borders. By the time rival families realized how much power he had accumulated, the Moretti Empire already controlled several of the city's most valuable economic pipelines. From the outside, it looked like business. From the inside, it was control. And Luca Moretti controlled everything. which made his reaction to Clara Bennett's secret deeply unsettling for everyone in the room. The meeting ended soon after. No one argued. No one challenged Luca's decision. The Moretti security team escorted Clara out of the building with quiet efficiency, while the remaining members of the rival delegations stood frozen in confusion. They had expected a confrontation. Instead, they witnessed something far more disturbing: restraint. Outside, a line of black armored vehicles waited along the empty street. The night air felt colder as Clara stepped outside under the watchful eyes of Moretti security. The city around them looked ordinary. Cars passing in the distance, lights glowing from nearby office buildings. But the tension surrounding her made it feel like she had already crossed into another world. She had expected anger from Luca, or suspicion. Instead, he had simply watched her, carefully, as if trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly appeared in front of him. One of the security men opened the rear door of a car. Clara hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. Across from her, Luca Moretti entered the vehicle and closed the door. The convoy began moving almost immediately. Several black SUVs pulled away from the building and merged into the quiet nighttime traffic, heading north through the city. Inside the car, silence settled between them. Clara studied Luca cautiously. He looked exactly as people described him: tall, composed, dressed in a sharply tailored dark suit that made him look more like a powerful executive than the leader of a criminal empire. His expression revealed nothing, but his eyes carried an intensity that made it clear he was still thinking about what she had said during the meeting. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The city gradually disappeared behind them as the convoy moved toward the outskirts of Chicago. Eventually, the buildings thinned and the road turned onto a private highway lined with tall trees. A few minutes later, iron gates appeared ahead. They opened automatically as the convoy approached. Beyond them stood the Moretti estate. Clara felt a quiet shock when she saw it. The property stretched across a massive area surrounded by security walls and surveillance towers. The mansion itself stood at the center of the estate, like a fortress. Large stone architecture combined with modern glass structures that reflected the surrounding forest. Security teams moved quietly across the grounds. Vehicles patrolled the perimeter roads. Every entrance was monitored. It was not simply a home. It was the headquarters of an empire. The convoy stopped near the main entrance. One of the security men opened Clara's door, guiding her out of the car. Luca stepped out moments later. Without speaking, he walked toward the mansion entrance. Clara followed. Inside, the interior looked just as imposing as the outside. High ceilings stretched above polished marble floors. Large windows overlooked the estate grounds, while several corridors extended deeper into the building toward offices, meeting rooms, and private quarters. Staff members moved quietly through the hallways, clearly accustomed to the disciplined environment of the Moretti organization. Clara realized something important almost immediately. Everyone inside the mansion knew who Luca Moretti was, and everyone moved carefully around him, not because he demanded attention, because his authority required none. Luca finally stopped inside a large office overlooking the forest behind the estate. He turned toward Clara. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he finally asked a question that had been hanging in the air since the meeting. "How do you know about that?" Clara felt her heart beat faster. She had expected anger. Instead, his voice carried controlled curiosity. "The information belongs to my father," she said quietly. Luca watched her carefully. That answer only raised more questions. For a man who rarely showed hesitation, his silence now felt almost unnatural. Clara noticed it, which only made her more confused, because she had heard countless stories about Luca Moretti. Stories about how quickly he made decisions, how rarely he questioned his instincts. And yet now he looked like someone who had just discovered something that did not fit the world he understood. Finally, he stepped toward the large desk near the window and activated a digital display. Several names appeared on the screen: financial institutions, shipping companies, private investment networks, all connected by complex financial pathways. "This network," Luca said calmly, "has existed for decades." Clara stared at the screen. She recognized some of the companies. Her father had mentioned them years earlier, but she had never realized how large the system actually was. It controls billions of dollars in hidden assets, Luca continued. Corporate money, political donations, criminal investments. He looked back at her. Very few people even know it exists. Clara felt a quiet realization forming in her mind, which meant the secret she had revealed during the meeting should have been impossible for her to know. And that was exactly what Luca was thinking, because the moment she mentioned the system, something about her suddenly stopped making sense. And Luca Moretti hated mysteries. He turned away from the display and walked toward the window overlooking the forest. For several seconds, the room remained silent again. Clara watched him carefully. "Why didn't you kill me?" she finally asked. The question hung in the air between them. Luca turned slowly. His expression remained calm, but his answer carried a weight Clara had not expected. Because people who know about that network don't appear by accident. The statement sent a chill through her, which meant Luca Moretti did not believe her involvement was coincidence. He believed she was connected to something far larger, something hidden inside the world he controlled. Clara suddenly realized something else. For the first time since she met him, Luca Moretti was not acting like a man who had already solved the situation. He was investigating it, which meant the secret she carried had done something almost impossible. It had forced the most decisive man in Chicago's criminal underworld to stop. Later that night, after Clara was escorted to a private room inside the estate, Luca returned to his office alone. The calm expression he maintained during their conversation faded slightly, because the moment Clara mentioned the hidden financial network, something inside his memory had stirred. A name, a file, an investigation he had ordered years earlier. Luca opened a secure terminal on his desk and accessed the Moretti intelligence archives. Within minutes, a list of records appeared on the screen. Several investigations connected to the same financial network Clara had mentioned. Most of them had ended without answers, except one, a file connected to a businessman who disappeared nearly 15 years earlier. The man's name appeared on the screen: Arthur Bennett, Clara Bennett's father. Luca leaned back slowly in his chair as the realization formed. He opened the file. Inside were records from an old investigation his organization had abandoned years earlier. But something else caught his attention. A note written by one of his analysts at the time. The note mentioned a rumor connected to Arthur Bennett's disappearance. A rumor that he had hidden something valuable before vanishing. Something tied to a person. Luca stared at the screen, because the final line of the report contained a name he had not expected to see again: Clara Bennett. And if the investigation was correct, the woman now sleeping inside the Moretti estate might be connected to a secret powerful enough to change the balance of power in the entire criminal world. Clara Bennett expected cruelty from a man who had taken her into his world. Instead, she found something far more unsettling: silence. The morning after Luca Moretti reviewed the file connected to her father, the Moretti estate moved with its usual quiet discipline. Staff members carried out their tasks without hesitation. Security teams rotated through their patrol routes, and the Empire's daily operations continued, as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet inside that routine, Clara felt something she could not ignore. A tension, not the kind that came from hostility or suspicion. Something stranger, something cautious. The room where she had been placed overlooked a wide stretch of forest that surrounded the estate. From the window, she could see several patrol vehicles moving slowly along the property's outer perimeter. Tall security towers rose above the treeline, each equipped with surveillance cameras and floodlights that monitored the grounds 24 hours a day. The Moretti estate was enormous. What looked like a private mansion from the outside was actually the center of a carefully organized empire. The main residence stood in the middle of the property like a fortress, but beyond it stretched several other structures connected through paved roads and secure courtyards. One building housed financial analysts who monitored international transactions linked to Moretti shipping companies. Another served as a communications center coordinating security operations across multiple cities. Every part of the estate had a purpose. Every movement inside it followed strict rules. And every rule existed for one reason: control. Clara had grown up around the edges of the criminal world her father once operated in, but nothing she had seen before compared to the scale of the Moretti organization. This was not a gang. It was an empire disguised as a business network, and now she was living inside it. By mid-morning, one of the household staff members escorted Clara through the main corridors of the mansion toward a dining room overlooking the eastern side of the estate. The interior architecture reflected Luca Moretti's personality, elegant but controlled. Dark wood walls, modern lighting, and large glass windows created an atmosphere that felt both luxurious and carefully guarded. Several men were already seated around the table when Clara entered. They stopped talking immediately. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it carried enough tension for Clara to notice. One of the men stood. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the calm posture of someone accustomed to authority. His sharp features and composed expression suggested the same disciplined mindset that seemed to define everyone working within Luca Moretti's organization. "Nathan Hale," he said simply. The introduction carried quiet importance. Nathan Hale was not just another member of the Moretti organization. He was Luca Moretti's closest strategist. In many ways, Nathan served as a mind that helped translate Luca's long-term plans into action. Within the criminal networks operating across Chicago and beyond, Nathan Hale was known as the man who ensured the Moretti empire always remained several steps ahead of its rivals. Nathan's eyes studied Clara carefully, not with hostility, with calculation. He understood exactly who she was. More importantly, he understood why Luca had brought her here. "Breakfast has already been prepared," Nathan said calmly. His voice carried the tone of someone used to giving quiet instructions rather than asking questions. Clara sat across from him. The other men at the table remained silent, their attention shifting between her and Nathan as if waiting to see how the conversation would unfold. For several minutes, the only sounds in the room came from the clinking of silverware and the distant movement of staff in the hallways outside. Clara noticed something unusual. None of the men around the table treated her with disrespect, but they also avoided looking directly at her for long, as if her presence carried a weight they did not fully understand. Eventually Nathan spoke again. "Mr. Moretti will meet with you later today," he said. The statement sounded more like a confirmation than a promise. Clara nodded quietly. "What happens until then?" she asked. Nathan considered the question for a moment. "You remain here," he replied. "Not imprisoned, not threatened, simply contained." Clara finished the meal slowly, studying the behavior of the men around her. Their reactions made something increasingly clear. They already knew her name, and the moment they heard it, something about her presence had unsettled them. Later that afternoon, Clara began exploring the sections of the mansion she had been allowed to access. Security personnel moved quietly through the corridors, but none of them attempted to stop her. Instead, they simply watched from a respectful distance, which somehow felt more unsettling than open hostility. In the lower level of the mansion, she found a large operations room filled with digital screens displaying financial data, shipping routes, and surveillance feeds connected to various parts of the Moretti empire. Several analysts worked quietly inside the room. When Clara entered, their conversation stopped almost immediately. One of them whispered something to another employee. The second man turned toward her. His expression shifted the moment he recognized her. Not anger, not curiosity, something closer to concern. Clara felt a strange pressure building in her chest, because it was becoming obvious that people inside Luca Moretti's organization already knew something about her, something she herself did not fully understand. She left the operations room and walked toward the western wing of the estate, where several offices overlooked the private airfield located beyond the property. Everywhere she went, the same reaction followed: quiet recognition, careful observation, and an uneasy respect that felt completely out of place for someone in her situation. By evening, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. Clara was not being treated like a prisoner. She was being treated like someone dangerous. The realization unsettled her more than anything else, because the only explanation that made sense was the one she feared most. Her father had been involved in something far larger than she ever realized. And whatever that secret was, it still mattered inside the world Luca Moretti controlled. Night settled over the estate quietly. Security lights illuminated the outer walls, and patrol vehicles continued their steady movement along the perimeter roads. Clara returned to the hallway outside her room. As she approached the door, voices reached her from the adjacent corridor. Two men were speaking quietly. One of them sounded like Nathan Hale. Clara paused instinctively. She had no intention of eavesdropping, but the next words froze her in place. "This shouldn't be possible," the other man said. Nathan's voice answered calmly. Luca confirmed it himself. A brief silence followed. Then the second man spoke again, his tone lower now. "If the file is accurate, she shouldn't even be alive." Clara felt her heart begin to race, because they were clearly talking about her. Nathan sighed quietly. That's exactly why Luca wants answers. The second man hesitated before asking the question that made Clara's breath catch. "Do you think she knows?" Nathan's response came without hesitation. "No." Another silence followed. Then the man spoke again, more cautiously this time. "But someone inside this organization knew about her years ago." Clara's pulse quickened. Years ago, which meant her arrival inside the Moretti Empire had not been a coincidence. Nathan's voice lowered even further. "That's what Luca is trying to figure out." The second man whispered something Clara could barely hear. "If the old records are true, she's connected to the same network Arthur Bennett was investigating." Arthur Bennett, her father. Clara felt the floor beneath her feet suddenly feel unsteady, because the conversation revealed something she had never imagined. Her father had not simply been a businessman who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. He had been investigating something powerful enough that people inside the Moretti Empire still remembered it. Nathan finally spoke again. "Until we know the truth, no one touches her." Footsteps began moving toward the hallway. Clara slipped quietly into her room and closed the door before they could see her. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she had just heard. Someone inside Luca Moretti's empire had known about her long before she ever arrived at the estate. And if Nathan Hale was right, the secret connected to her father might be far more dangerous than she ever imagined, because the moment she stepped into Luca Moretti's world, she had unknowingly walked straight into a mystery that had already been waiting for her. The secret Clara Bennett had tried to hide for most of her life was beginning to reveal a truth she never expected. It might be the reason Luca Moretti refused to treat her like property. The thought lingered in Clara's mind long after the conversation she overheard in the hallway outside the estate's meeting rooms. Nathan Hale's quiet admission that someone inside the Moretti Empire had already known who she was changed the way she saw everything around her. For the first time since arriving at the estate, Clara stopped thinking of herself as someone caught in a stranger's world. Instead, she began wondering if that world had been connected to her long before she ever stepped through the gates. The possibility disturbed her. For years, Clara had believed her past was simple. Her family owned a small logistics company. Her father ran shipping operations along several Midwestern trade routes, moving ordinary cargo between warehouses and rail depots. Their life had never been glamorous, but it had been stable. Then everything collapsed after her father died and Daniel took control of the company. At least, that was the story Clara had always believed. Now she began to question it. The first step in understanding the truth was learning more about the company her father once controlled. Clara spent several afternoons inside the mansion's library reviewing archived records she managed to access through the estate's private computer network. The Moretti organization maintained extensive databases covering shipping operations across several decades. Cargo manifests, contract agreements, corporate partnerships. Most of the information related to international trade routes connected to the same industry her father once worked in. At first, the records revealed nothing unusual, but as Clara searched deeper into the older files, she noticed something that made her pause. Her father's company name appeared several times in side documents connected to Moretti-controlled shipping routes. The dates on those records stretched back nearly 15 years, long before Daniel ever borrowed money from dangerous lenders. Clara stared at the screen in disbelief. According to the archive files, the Bennett family business had once transported cargo through several ports managed by companies linked to the Moretti network. Not openly. The connections were buried beneath layers of subcontracting agreements and corporate partnerships. But the evidence was clear. Her father had done business with organizations connected to Luca Moretti. The discovery raised more questions than answers. If their family business had already been linked to the Moretti empire years ago, why had no one ever mentioned it? And why had Luca reacted so strongly when Clara revealed the secret she carried during the meeting at the restaurant? The mystery deepened later that evening when Luca asked to speak with her privately. The meeting took place in his office on the top floor of the estate. Large windows overlooked the dark forest surrounding the property, while soft lighting illuminated shelves filled with financial reports and international trade records. Luca stood near the window when Clara entered. He remained silent for several seconds before turning toward her. His expression was calm, but Clara sensed the seriousness behind his request immediately. He asked her about her childhood. Specifically, he wanted to know what she remembered about her father's work during the final years before his death. The question surprised her. Clara explained that most of her memories involved ordinary business operations, meetings with shipping partners, paperwork related to cargo deliveries, and occasional trips to regional ports where their company handled transportation contracts. But there was one detail she had never fully understood. During the final year before his death, her father had become unusually secretive about certain shipments. He sometimes worked late into the night, reviewing documents in his office. Several times she remembered him receiving calls that seemed to make him nervous. At the time, Clara assumed the stress came from financial pressures affecting the company. But now she began to wonder if something else had been happening. Luca listened carefully to every detail. When Clara finished speaking, he walked to his desk and opened a folder containing several documents. Inside were records from the same shipping routes Clara had discovered earlier in the estate's database. But these documents contained additional information: encrypted cargo tracking numbers, financial transfers linked to offshore accounts, and several shipment logs marked with security classifications rarely used in ordinary commercial transport. Luca explained that those particular shipments had been connected to something much larger than normal trade. Years earlier, multiple criminal organizations had quietly begun using legitimate shipping networks to move sensitive materials across international borders. Information, encrypted financial data, evidence connected to powerful individuals operating within both the criminal world and legitimate business industries. The system allowed those organizations to transport information too dangerous to transmit electronically. But someone inside that network had eventually discovered something unexpected: Clara's father. According to the documents Luca possessed, the Bennett family company had unknowingly transported several of those shipments through its logistics routes. At some point, Clara's father realized the cargo he was moving was not ordinary merchandise. He had discovered a hidden system used by powerful criminal groups to move secrets across the world, and that discovery had placed him in enormous danger. Clara felt a cold weight settle in her chest as the truth began forming. Her father's death had never been properly explained. Authorities ruled it an accident, but now the timeline seemed far too convenient. The situation became even more disturbing when Luca revealed the final detail. Daniel Bennett had also discovered the same hidden system while running the family company after their father died, which meant Daniel's decision to borrow money from dangerous lenders had not been a random mistake. It had been connected to something he was investigating. Luca placed one final document on the desk in front of Clara. It contained fragments of encrypted information Daniel had attempted to access shortly before he disappeared. The data connected to a network used by powerful organizations to hide financial records and political secrets. Daniel had not simply been trying to save the family business. He had been trying to expose something. Clara stared at the document as a terrifying realization slowly emerged. Her brother had not vanished because of unpaid debt. He had been targeted because of what he discovered. The debt that forced Clara Bennett into Luca Moretti's world had never truly been about money. It had been the opening move in something far more dangerous: a war. Clara realized that truth slowly as the investigation into her brother's disappearance deepened inside the Moretti estate. The documents Luca revealed during their meeting made one fact impossible to ignore. Daniel Bennett had not simply stumbled into financial trouble. He had uncovered something powerful enough to disturb the balance of influence between multiple criminal organizations. And those organizations were now searching for him. The first signs of the growing conflict appeared through the intelligence reports delivered to Luca's office over the following days. Members of his inner circle gathered around the large conference table in the estate strategy room, while encrypted messages and surveillance images appeared on the digital screen mounted along the far wall. Clara watched the reports quietly from her seat near the edge of the table. Several unfamiliar names appeared across the documents, leaders of criminal groups operating in cities far beyond Chicago or New York. Some controlled smuggling routes across Eastern Europe. Others managed financial networks, connecting offshore banks with powerful investors hidden behind layers of corporate identities. Each of them had begun asking the same question: where was Daniel Bennett? Nathan Hale presented the intelligence calmly. His investigation confirmed that at least 3 rival organizations had recently started searching for Daniel across multiple states. Private investigators had contacted former employees of the Bennett family company. Several financial analysts working for those groups had attempted to trace Daniel's digital activity during the weeks before his disappearance. The level of attention revealed something important. Daniel Bennett had discovered information valuable enough to attract the interest of powerful people. And those people were not willing to let that information remain hidden. Luca remained silent while the reports continued. His expression revealed nothing, but Clara could sense the tension building beneath his calm exterior. The problem facing him was becoming clear. Daniel's discovery had not only created danger for the Bennett family, it had pulled the Moretti Empire into a conflict with organizations that rarely worked together. Nathan explained that the same encrypted financial network Daniel had attempted to access appeared in multiple investigations across international banking systems. Several suspicious transactions connected to that network had recently moved through offshore accounts tied to corporate shells in London, Zurich, and Singapore. The money flowing through those accounts did not belong to ordinary criminals. It belonged to powerful elites, people who operated in both the legal financial world and the hidden markets controlled by organized crime. The network functioned as a secret vault. Instead of storing physical assets, it stored information, confidential financial records, evidence of illegal political deals, documents capable of destroying reputations and collapsing powerful institutions. Clara felt a quiet chill as she understood the scale of what her brother had uncovered. Daniel Bennett had stumbled onto a system used by influential figures to protect their most dangerous secrets. And once he began investigating it, his life became expendable. The realization made the original debt arrangement appear very different. Clara had believed Daniel borrowed money from dangerous lenders simply to save the family business. But the more she examined the financial records he left behind, the clearer the truth became. The loan had been connected to the network itself. Daniel had borrowed money from one of the same financial channels used to hide the encrypted information he was investigating. It had been his way into the system. Clara spent several evenings inside the estate's analysis room, helping Luca's team examine the fragments of data Daniel left behind. Her familiarity with the Bennett family company records helped identify patterns others might have missed. Cargo manifests, financial transfers, and encrypted shipping codes slowly revealed the path Daniel followed during his investigation. The pattern led through several international shipping routes. Each route connected legitimate cargo companies with financial accounts that appeared completely unrelated on the surface. But beneath that complexity was a hidden structure, a system designed to move information between powerful people who never wanted their secrets exposed. Clara realized something else as she studied the records. Daniel had come dangerously close to exposing an entire network. Several of the encrypted accounts he accessed contained links to individuals operating at the highest levels of both government and finance, people whose public reputations depended on keeping those secrets buried. If Daniel had successfully decoded the entire system, the consequences could have shaken multiple institutions across the world. That was why he disappeared. Someone inside the network realized what he was doing, and they removed the threat before he could finish. The tension inside the Moretti estate grew heavier as more evidence emerged. Security around the property increased. Additional surveillance teams monitored the surrounding roads, and several trusted members of Luca's organization were sent to investigate Daniel's last known locations. But the deeper the investigation went, the more troubling the situation became. Because Daniel's access to the network required information he should never have possessed. Encrypted security codes, restricted financial pathways, internal transaction records. All of those details suggested he had received help from someone with inside knowledge, someone who already understood how the system worked. Clara was studying another set of financial transfers late one night when Nathan entered the analysis room carrying a folder of newly recovered data. His expression remained calm, but something about the way he placed the folder on the table suggested the information inside it was important. Luca opened the file and scanned the documents carefully. Several transaction records connected to Daniel's investigation had passed through financial channels controlled by the Moretti organization itself. At first glance, the transfers appeared routine, but one detail stood out immediately. The authorization codes attached to those transactions belonged to someone inside Luca's own network. Clara watched Luca's reaction closely. The realization forming in his mind was the same one she felt herself. Daniel Bennett had not uncovered the secret financial network alone. Someone inside the Moretti empire had helped him. Or worse, someone inside the organization had been working with the network all along. The possibility changed everything, because the evidence suggested that the war now forming around Daniel's discovery had started with betrayal much closer to home. The realization that someone inside the Moretti organization had been connected to Daniel Bennett's investigation changed the dynamic inside the estate completely, but it also changed something else. For the first time since Clara Bennett entered Luca Moretti's world as payment for a debt, the distance between them began to disappear, because the woman he had once viewed as part of a financial arrangement was now becoming something far more valuable, an ally. The discovery that Daniel had received help from someone within the Moretti empire created a problem Luca could not solve alone. Whoever had assisted Daniel possessed knowledge of the same secret financial network that several powerful organizations were now desperately trying to control. That meant the threat did not only exist outside Luca's empire, it existed within it. And for a man who had built his reputation on control, that possibility was unacceptable. Over the next several days, the investigation intensified. Luca allowed only a small group of trusted people to work on the problem. Nathan Hale, two financial analysts from the Moretti Network, and Clara herself. At first, Clara found the situation difficult to accept. Only weeks earlier, she had been a stranger trapped inside the mansion, unsure whether the man who controlled this empire saw her as anything more than a debt payment. Now she was sitting beside him in his state strategy room, studying financial records that could expose criminal operations stretching across continents. The chain felt surreal. But the more time Clara spent working alongside Luca, the more she began to understand how his mind worked. Luca Moretti approached problems the way a chess master approached a board. Every move had consequences. Every piece of information carried potential value, and every person involved in the situation had a role to play. For the first time since arriving at the estate, Clara felt like she was no longer simply reacting to events beyond her control. She was helping shape them. Their collaboration began quietly. Clara started by organizing the fragments of data Daniel had left behind. Her familiarity with the Bennett family company records helped identify connections that Luca's analysts had initially overlooked. Shipping manifests from Daniel's final months revealed patterns in cargo movements that had once seemed ordinary. But when cross-referenced with the encrypted financial transfers discovered earlier, those patterns exposed something much more complicated. The cargo shipments were not transporting goods. They were transporting information. Encrypted storage drives hidden inside legitimate shipments moved between international ports controlled by various criminal organizations. Each drive contained sensitive financial records belonging to powerful individuals, politicians, corporate leaders, and organized crime figures who needed their secrets stored in a system that could not easily be traced. The network functioned like an underground archive. Anyone who controlled access to it possessed leverage over some of the most powerful people in the world. Daniel Bennett had nearly uncovered the entire system, and that was why he disappeared. One evening, as Clara and Luca reviewed another set of financial transfers, she noticed something unusual buried inside a group of encrypted account numbers. At first, the sequence looked identical to the dozens of other financial records connected to the network. But one detail made her pause. The account identification code contained a pattern she recognized. It matched the same coding structure used by the Bennett family company years earlier, when her father managed shipping contracts along the Midwest trade routes. Clara leaned closer to the screen, studying the numbers carefully. Then she began tracing the account through the system's internal records. The discovery that followed made the room fall silent. The account was not just connected to the secret financial network. It had been created nearly 20 years earlier, long before Daniel's investigation, long before the Bennett family company collapsed. And the original authorization linked to the account belonged to someone with direct ties to the Moretti organization. Clara slowly turned toward Luca. For several seconds, he said nothing. His expression remained calm, but the intensity in his eyes made it clear he understood the implications immediately. The hidden account was not simply another financial node inside the network. It was a foundation. From that account, dozens of other encrypted financial pathways have been created over the years, each one connected to powerful individuals across multiple industries. If the account's records were exposed, the information inside it could destroy several criminal empires overnight. Clara continued analyzing the account's transaction history. The records revealed something even more disturbing. Whoever controlled the account had been moving enormous sums of money through it for decades. Funds connected to secret deals between criminal organizations and influential elites operating within legitimate governments and corporations. The network Daniel uncovered was far larger than they had imagined, and the account Clara discovered was the key to understanding its entire structure. Luca stood quietly behind her as she examined the final section of the encrypted file. Then she noticed one last detail. The most recent transaction connected to the account had occurred only weeks earlier, around the same time Daniel disappeared, which meant someone inside the network was still actively using it. Clara's heart began to race as she realized the full significance of what she had found, because the account did not just hold financial data. It held evidence powerful enough to collapse several criminal empires at once. The conspiracy threatening Luca Moretti's empire had not begun with strangers or rival gangs. It had begun with someone he trusted. For several hours after Clara Bennett uncovered a hidden financial account, the strategy room inside the Moretti estate remained filled with quiet tension. The discovery had revealed something far more serious than an external threat. It exposed the possibility that the enemy had been operating inside Luca's organization for years. The encrypted account Clara discovered was not simply another financial pathway hidden within the criminal network Daniel Bennett had investigated. It was the origin point. Every secondary account connected to the system traced back to that one foundation. An account created using authorization credentials belonging to someone with direct access to the Moretti Empire's financial structure. Nathan Hale spent the entire night examining the system logs and transaction history connected to that account. His analysis required reconstructing old digital records that had been partially erased over time. By early morning, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The encrypted financial system had been designed with incredible precision. Money flowed through layers of international banks before disappearing into protected vault accounts controlled by individuals whose names rarely appeared in public records. The funds moved between corporations, shell companies, and private trusts across multiple countries. At the center of the network was something far more valuable than money: information. Sensitive files were stored alongside the financial transfers. Documents containing evidence of corruption, bribery, and criminal partnerships between powerful figures in business, politics, and organized crime. The system served as a vault of secrets. Anyone who controlled or possessed leverage over some of the most influential people in the world. Daniel Bennett had unknowingly uncovered the first layer of that system while trying to rebuild his father's shipping company. But the more Daniel investigated, the more he realized the financial network was tied to something much larger than a simple smuggling operation. He had discovered a hidden archive of power. That discovery sealed his fate. Clara sat quietly across the strategy table as Nathan placed a final set of reconstructed records in front of Luca. The documents revealed the identity connected to creation of the encrypted account 20 years earlier. The name on the authorization signature belonged to someone who had stood beside Luca for most of his life: Marco Moretti, Luca's cousin. For years, Marco had managed several of the organization's most sensitive financial operations. He handled corporate investments, international banking relationships, and internal accounting systems that allowed the Moretti Empire to operate across multiple countries without attracting attention. He had always appeared loyal, reliable, even family, but the records showed something very different. Marco had created the hidden account long before Daniel Bennett ever discovered the network. At first, the system functioned as a discrete financial channel used to move funds between criminal partners without exposing the transactions to outside authorities. But over time, the network expanded. Powerful individuals began storing encrypted files alongside their financial deposits. The archive grew slowly, accumulating information that could destroy reputations and collapse entire organizations if revealed. Marco had built the system quietly for decades, and he had done it inside Luca's empire. The realization hung heavily in the room. Clara felt the weight of it settle into her thoughts. Marco had not simply betrayed Luca. He had used the Moretti Empire as a foundation for a secret structure capable of controlling powerful people across the world. But the system depended on one crucial weakness: control of the primary account. Whoever possessed the authorization key to that account controlled access to the entire archive. That key was now connected to Clara Bennett. The moment Daniel Bennett accessed the system during his investigation, he triggered a series of security protocols designed to track unauthorized activity. Marco realized someone had discovered the network. Daniel disappeared soon after, but the fragments of data Daniel managed to extract eventually led Clara to the hidden account. Now, the secret system Marco built was exposed. The danger surrounding that discovery became immediate. Nathan's security team began reporting unusual activity around the estate before sunrise. Surveillance cameras positioned along the outer perimeter captured images of unfamiliar vehicles moving slowly along the roads surrounding the property. Several of those vehicles belonged to criminal organizations already suspected of searching for Daniel Bennett's discovery. Within hours, additional reports confirmed that rival factions had started mobilizing resources across multiple cities. They believed Clara Bennett now possessed access to the secret archive, and whoever captured her would control the network. Luca responded quickly. He issued new instructions to every division of his organization. Shipping operations were temporarily halted. Financial accounts connected to the Moretti Empire were moved through secure channels, and security teams across the estate were placed on high alert. The mansion that once functioned as a quiet command center now operated like a fortress preparing for war. Clara watched the preparations with a growing awareness of how serious the situation had become. For weeks, she had been trying to understand the secret her brother discovered. Now she realized that secret had placed her at the center of a global conflict between powerful criminal empires, and every one of them wanted what she possessed. Lucas stood near the large window overlooking the estate grounds while reviewing the final intelligence reports from Nathan. His expression remained calm, but Clara could sense the quiet intensity behind it. For a man who valued control above everything else, the betrayal from within his own family had changed the stakes completely. Marco Moretti had not only built the secret network, he had also been communicating with the rival factions searching for it. Nathan's investigation uncovered encrypted messages sent from Marco's private accounts to leaders of several criminal organizations. Those messages contained one clear instruction: find Clara Bennett, because the woman Luca Moretti bought to settle a family debt now held the key to unlocking the most powerful archive of secrets in the criminal world. The realization created one final problem. If Marco wanted control of the network again, he would have to come for Clara himself, which meant the final confrontation between the two sides was inevitable. Lucas slowly closed a folder containing the last piece of evidence. Then he spoke quietly to Nathan. Prepare the estate defenses, because the man responsible for betrayal would not remain hidden any longer. The mastermind behind the entire conspiracy was finally ready to reveal himself. Clara Bennett had entered Luca Moretti's world as payment for a debt, but now she stood at the center of a decision powerful enough to reshape the empire that had claimed her. The night the confrontation finally arrived, the Moretti estate no longer resembled the quiet fortress Clara had grown used to. Security teams moved across the grounds with urgent coordination. Surveillance screens inside the mansion displayed activity from every corner of the property, tracking vehicles approaching to the forest roads surrounding the estate. Nathan Hale stood in the strategy room, reviewing the latest intelligence reports. Multiple vehicles had been detected moving toward the outer perimeter. Clara did not need confirmation to understand who was coming. Marco Moretti had decided to end the conflict personally. For weeks, the hidden financial network had remained locked behind the encrypted authorization Daniel Bennett left behind. Clara now possessed the only key capable of unlocking the archive of secrets Marco had built over decades, and Marco intended to reclaim it. The convoy arrived shortly after midnight. Black vehicles rolled slowly through the long road, leading toward the estate gates, while armed men stepped out and positioned themselves along the perimeter. They moved with discipline that suggested years of experience working inside organized criminal operations. But the man who stepped out of the lead car carried a calm confidence that made the situation feel even more dangerous. Marco Moretti. He had always been known inside the organization as a quiet strategist, someone who preferred controlling events from behind the scenes rather than confronting problems directly. Tonight, he had chosen a different approach. Marco walked forward until the bright security lights surrounding the estate illuminated his face clearly. Inside the strategy room, Luca watched the scene unfold through surveillance monitors. Clara stood beside him. The moment felt strangely calm despite the tension building outside. For weeks the conspiracy had been unraveling piece by piece. Now the final chapter had arrived. Marco's voice reached the estate security speakers moments later. He spoke with the same composed tone that once made him one of the most respected figures inside the Moretti empire. Marco explained that the situation had become unnecessarily complicated. The hidden archive of secrets he created was never meant to trigger a war between criminal organizations. It had been designed to maintain balance. Powerful elites stored their most dangerous information inside the encrypted network because they trusted the system to protect their secrets. But Daniel Bennett's investigation threatened to expose everything. Marco had removed Daniel from the situation to prevent that disaster. Unfortunately, Clara Bennett had inherited the final access key, which meant the archive now existed beyond Marco's control. His proposal was simple. If Clara surrendered the authorization code, the conflict would end immediately. The rival faction surrounding the estate would withdraw, and the Moretti Empire would remain untouched. The silence inside the strategy room lasted several seconds after Marco finished speaking. Nathan watched Luca carefully, waiting for instructions. But Luca remained still. His gaze remained fixed on the monitors displaying Marco's figure standing outside the estate gates. Clara understood the choice he was facing. The encrypted archive contained secrets powerful enough to destroy the reputations of people across governments, corporations, and criminal organizations around the world. If Marco regained control of the network, he would possess leverage over countless powerful figures. But if the information was released, the consequences could ignite chaos far beyond the criminal world. For the first time since the war began, Clara realized that she, not Luca, held the real power. Daniel Bennett had not simply uncovered a secret network. He had left the final decision in her hands. Clara stepped closer to the console, displaying the encrypted system. Nathan glanced toward her with quiet concern, but Luca said nothing. He understood what she was about to do. Clara entered the final command sequence Daniel had hidden within the archive security protocols. The system responded immediately. Instead of unlocking the network for Marco, the command activated a different function Daniel had designed as a safeguard. If unauthorized parties attempted to seize control of the archive, the system would automatically distribute its contents across multiple encrypted channels connected to investigative agencies and international regulators. Within seconds, the archive began transmitting financial records, political agreements, evidence of corruption tied to powerful elites across multiple countries. The network Marco had built to control the world's secrets was collapsing. Outside the estate, the rival factions realized what happened. Several vehicles retreated quickly, their occupants unwilling to remain near the scene once the information inside the archive became public. Marco Moretti remained standing near the gate for several seconds longer. For the first time, his calm expression disappeared. The empire he built inside the shadows had just been destroyed by the one person he never expected to challenge him, Clara Bennett. Inside the strategy room, the tension slowly faded as the surveillance screens showed the vehicles leaving the property one by one. The war had ended. Weeks later, the world surrounding the Moretti Empire looked very different. The exposure of the encrypted archive triggered investigations across multiple financial systems and political institutions. Several powerful individuals connected to the secret network disappeared from public view. Others faced consequences that reshaped the balance of power within their industries. The Moretti Empire survived the chaos, but it had changed. Luca Moretti had spent years building an organization based on control. Now he understood something important. Control could be lost in a single moment if the wrong person held the right information. Clara Bennett stood on the balcony overlooking the state grounds one evening as the sun disappeared beyond the forest. The woman who once entered Luca's world as payment for a debt no longer felt like a prisoner. She had become something else. Someone capable of influencing events powerful enough to shape the future of an empire. Luca stepped beside her quietly. For a moment, they both looked out across the property in silence. The world beyond the estate gates had become far more complicated since the night Clara Bennett arrived. And Luca realized something that would change his future decisions. The woman he bought to settle a debt might one day become the only person powerful enough to challenge him again.